Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is a short but spine-tingling story from the incredible mind of Rax00 over on Reddit No Sleep. As ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled The Reason I Stay Out of the Woods. Let's get straight into that. I'm a road worker for the Department of Transportation. It's a pretty decent job. It's steady, it pays the bills, and it keeps me from melting my brain at a desk all day. I alternate between the day and the night shift frequently, and both have their perks, so I try not to complain. At nights there's less traffic to direct, and we can really focus on getting the work done. I actually prefer that, or at least I did. That was before strange things started happening. Well, the first instance happened one night a couple of years ago when I first started the job. I was assigned to the night shift along with 8 others, and we were repairing a few potholes on a highway roughly 15 miles or so from the nearest town. Being in the Blue Ridge Mountains, this means being completely surrounded by dense woods. I didn't know anyone else on the crew except for my good friend, Johnny, who usually gets stuck on the same night shift's job that I do. We had just finished our assignment for the night, and so Johnny and I grabbed some water out of the company cooler and sat on a guardrail facing the woods. We sat there for a while, talking about life and catching up from the last time that we had worked together. The other members of the crew kept working, and so the farther down the road that they got, the less light that Johnny and I had. It got to the point where they were a couple of 100 feet away and we could barely see our hands in front of our faces, and so we decided to go and catch up. As I hopped off the guardrail and walked back to the road, I heard a loud thud coming from the woods, like something hit the ground and hard. I quickly turned around and saw a few branches moving near the entrance of the woods. What was that? I looked towards Johnny and he had a puzzled look on his face. The same one that I imagined I had too. After quietly waiting for a few minutes afterwards to see if we could hear more, we chalked it up to being a large deer and headed back towards the light of the roadwork. What I saw next stuck with me for so long. As we got closer to the work vehicles, I glanced back towards where we heard the noise, and there was a tall figure standing right there in the middle of the road, a couple of 100 feet away from us. I completely froze. It was difficult to make out any features on account of how dark it was, but I remember its eyes. Those damn red eyes, looking right at me. Johnny hadn't noticed that I wasn't walking with him anymore, and so I spun around to get his attention. But whenever I pointed towards where I had seen that horrifying image, it was gone. He laughed at me and said I was letting my imagination get the best of me, but I know what I saw. We finished up our job and I got out of there as soon as possible. Another story that I have takes place a couple of weeks after the first one. By that time, I had calmed down and actually convinced myself that I hadn't really seen anything, and that it was my eyes just playing tricks on me. We were assigned to a paving job on the same highway, but about 10 miles away from the original site. I was a little nervous about going back there, but thankfully this time it was during the day. But being on the day shift also has its downsides, especially in the middle of summer. The temperature on the asphalt can get extremely high, so you need to bring sun protection and plenty of water if you don't want to melt. On days like that, I find myself usually drinking 2 to 3 bottles of water every hour. Well, we started our work and it wasn't long before I felt the need to urinate. The problem with paving jobs is that they're constantly moving, which means no porta potties. I knew that my only option was in the woods. I had to go so badly that I didn't even think about what could have been in there. I ran down the shoulder and straight into the woods and walked about 100 feet or so, just to guarantee that no one could see me from the road. I went to the nearest tree and did my business. It was only when relief came over me that I was able to think clearly. Images from the event a couple of weeks ago came flooding into my head, and I was overwhelmed with an intense feeling of absolute dread. I zipped up my pants as fast as I could and bolted towards the road. I heard a snap of a twig coming from behind me, and that made me stop in fear. I couldn't bring myself to turn around because that's when I felt it. A warm breath on the back of my neck. I could hear it too because it seemed forced, almost like a faint grunt. It sent a shiver down my spine that made every hair I had stand up. And I finally got the courage and I turned around as fast as I could. And there was nothing there. I didn't care about the impossibility of it. I got the hell out of those woods. As soon as I got back to the job site, the road crew could tell something was wrong, and so they asked what happened. At this point, I knew it wasn't just my imagination, and so I told them exactly what had happened. I could see it in their eyes, that they looked terrified. I knew something was wrong when the project manager called everyone to the site and told us all to go home for the day. He then looked at me and told me to get in his truck to ride back to the department with him. He was quiet for the first 10 minutes or so, and then he cleared his throat and finally spoke. "What did you see, boy?" he said. I had told him of the night a few weeks prior and how I just saw a tall dark figure with red eyes. He just nodded his head while he solemnly stared at the road in front of him. He didn't say anything the rest of the ride back, but I couldn't help but feel something he wasn't telling me. We pulled up to the department building and I got out of his truck. Just before I could close the car door, he looked at me and said something I haven't been able to shake since. Stay out of the woods," he said. "It only stirs up trouble." And before I could say anything else, he grabbed the door to shut it and drove off. I have more stories about these woods. Some I'm absolutely terrified to tell, but I feel like I need to get them out. Not only to get them off of my chest, but to warn people about what's happening in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'll post them here as soon as I am able. My dog is a man-eater. Let's get straight into that. When I was a teenager, back in Labrador, my Uncle Russ gave me my very first dog. Our family had a team of sled dogs we kept on the island in the off-season, and he joined their numbers. And since the weather was warm and the dogs were not exactly friendly or housebroken, it was a way to let them run free for a while during the months when there was no snow. Now we'd go out there and feed them every so often, and they would also hunt and catch food for themselves. And there were plenty of rabbits and other small game for them to go after on their own private island. There was also a patch of blueberry bushes that the dogs claimed as their own. Those fucking blueberry bushes. If it hadn't been for them, none of this would have happened. All told, there were 7 dogs out there. My uncle's 4 dogs, my cousin Brandon's dog, Slasher, my other cousin Damien's dog Flea, and my own friendly little mongrel who I had named Runner. He was fast as hell and could outrace the rest of them, no problem, but he didn't have the muscle to put up much of a fight like the others when there was a scrap. My dog was by far the tamest one of the group, but Brandon and Damien had other plans for their pups. They wanted them to be attack dogs, it seemed, and they would train them to attack old couch cushions and whatever they could find, teaching them to bite, attack, kill, and only reluctantly to heal. Now Runner was a friendly mutt though. I wasn't supposed to get too attached to him, my uncle told me. The dogs were supposed to be workers, not pets, and their purpose in life was to take us around on our sleds during the colder months of the year. They seemed to enjoy it. It warmed their blood and got them moving, giving them a purpose and making the coldest months of winter pass by a little quicker for them. At least that's how I pictured it when I imagined it from their perspective. It was nearing the end of summer, and it was just about the time to go feed the dogs when I heard the news. My uncle came in and told me what had happened, and I remembered thinking, no, that can't be my dog he's talking about. My dog would never do that. I was told that a young couple in their early 20s had gone out to the island for a date, blueberry picking. They hadn't known that there was a private island just for our sled dogs, and that those were their fucking blueberries. The pack of dogs had killed the pair of them, tearing them to pieces and feeding on their remains. I imagine a couple out there with a basket full of blueberries and dropping it onto the ground, spilling them everywhere as they were surrounded by the pack of them, their mouths watering, teeth bared. I could picture all of them like that, except for Runner. There was no way he could have done such a thing. My uncle told me what to do. I would have to go out there and take care of things. There was no animal control or anything like that out where we lived. It was a little bit like the Wild West, East Coast style. He was too busy that day to deal with it. I took my rifle and got in my little aluminium boat. The air was cold and moist, making the outboard motor difficult to start. I was starting to think to myself what a relief that would be if I could only use that as an excuse. And then I gave it one more brisk pull and the old Mercury started up and began to hack black smoke and settled into a hoarse, coughing idle. I pushed in the choke quickly and turned the throttle. The engine began to purr like a laryngitic old cat, and salt water sprayed my face as I made my way out to the island. I knew what I had to do, but all I wanted was to go anywhere else but my set destination. Dogs that kill people couldn't be left to roam around on an island like that, where just anyone could wander ashore and be murdered by them again. I had to make things right, as difficult as that would be. The cold ocean mist hit me in the face and woke me up from a half slumber as I made my way ashore onto the island. I was alone. My cousins had decided not to come, and although part of me didn't want them there, I would never forgive them for that. In my mind, they had tainted my dog, made him evil, if he was actually capable of killing those people. If kids in school could be a bad influence, as my mum always touted, then I suppose dogs were capable of being that also. I couldn't help but wonder what terrible traits I had unwittingly picked up from my arsehole cousins as well. I tied up my boat to a tree and slung the rifle over my shoulder, and then walked into the tall brush of the island. And the place was big enough that it wasn't easy to find them right away. It seemed they were off napping somewhere, or perhaps hunting. That thought concerned me more than a little bit. I wondered if the dogs were getting hungry again, and if they had developed a taste for a different kind of meat. I had some jerky in my bag though, which I hoped I could use to tame them a bit. Well, suddenly I saw him coming towards me from the tree line. Runner. He was alone. Or at least it looked that way. My knees trembled thinking of the possibility that the other two were lurking somewhere in the tree line. He came running up to me with his big blue eyes wide and totally hopeful. But as he got closer, my own eyes widened as well, in horror, not hope. His mouth was crusted in blood, and it covered the front of his chest as well. The fur of his coat had been stained crimson red with the vital fluids of his victims. I had to picture him, then, pulling out a young woman's eyeball, and it popping as he bit into it, biting off her fingers and nose as she screamed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a piece of jerky to give to him. He sat down instinctively, as I had trained him to do so. My heart ached for what I was about to do. Tossing him the jerky, my hands trembled. While he ate it, I loaded my rifle, tears running down my face. Those bastards, I thought. They had made my dog evil, and now I would have to kill it. My plan had been initially to give it away, or worst case scenario, to set him free somewhere and hope that someone would take him in. I knew he wasn't welcome back in our community though, but I had no choice now. He was a man-eater, and man-eaters could not be allowed to live. They were too much of a threat to all of us in the cold of winter, when hunger set upon us, or without any mercy. I raised the sight to my eye as he munched on the jerky, and he looked up at me with his familiar eyes. And then his pupils darted away to the left. I heard the sound of animal feet racing toward me. Too late, and felt the sting of many teeth in my flesh. Suddenly, I was on the ground, being attacked by two dogs, Slasher and Flea, my cousin's two psychotic canines. Flea was trying to tear into my throat, and I saw his mouth was stained with the same crimson red with blood as Runner. I had my forearm up and tried to block his attacks with it. Screaming, I reached for my rifle but found it was on the ground a few feet away. Slasher came at me next, biting my legs and tearing away pieces of flesh from them with vicious bites. I squirmed away and pulled my legs from his teeth, howling in pain and anger. Trying to reach for the jerky, the dogs went for my hands next and bit at them, ignoring the plastic bag full of their former favourite meat on the ground, as if it was nothing to them. The two of them were coming at me from different angles, wearing me out and making it impossible for me to get up and retreat. I regretted going out there alone suddenly and was terrified I wouldn't make it back home alive. I turned in circles as they nipped at me from both directions and walked around me menacingly. When I paid attention to one, the other would attack. Once I was focused on that one for a second, the other one would come at me and take a fresh bite from my flesh. Flea lunged at me and managed to get past my forearm and locked his teeth onto my cheek. He clamped down and dug his teeth into the meat there, and then released me and began to howl in pain and yip as he backed away. It was Runner. He was attacking him from behind. He was trying to save my life. The other two dogs suddenly turned and began to growl and snap their teeth at Runner, instead of at me. He began to whine and back away, looking frightened and defeated. They lunged at him and gave chase as he ran away, bolting quickly into the forest, leading them away from me. I took the opportunity to grab my rifle and get the hell out of there as quickly as I could, and I didn't look back. I knew they wouldn't catch him. They never could. A piece of flesh hung from my face, and I held pressure to what appeared to be the deepest wound I had received on my forearm. That had received the brunt of the damage. I only hoped I wouldn't run across any other wildlife in such a bloodied state. Wolves and bears wouldn't think twice to take down a person if they smelled blood on them. My fear abated just a bit when I finally got back to my little aluminium boat and untied it. I ran it out into the water in my shoes, not caring if they got wet, and hopped on in, my heart beating a fast and furious pace. I started up the motor with one manic pull and turned the throttle to full speed forward. I knew the truth now, but I couldn't bring myself to be angry at my dog. He had saved my life, even if he was a man-eater. I still loved the little guy, and after all, those were his fucking blueberries. Damn berry-picking tourists. Wow. Absolutely chilling and quite gripping short story there. Please, of course, do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR and DMT's Cryptid crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things, why not get in touch with myself at the usual email as on screen, which is dmt_fear@gmail.com. I hope you're all well and happy, had a fantastic week at work or school, whatever it is that you do. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.